One thing I've been noticing about my own D&D games and tabletop games compared to the ones I'm seeing online is the ones that I'm seeing on TikTok, and then the classic ones like Critical Role and Dimension 20. They're all so actorly, and they live scene to scene, and the scenes kind of take their time, and players kind of act with each other. And that's always been sort of the immediate draw I had to D&D and tabletop, but the more I play and the more games I'm running, the less I'm doing that. Instead of it being about quality, I think it might just be a symptom of the games I'm playing recently. Like, I'm playing a once-a-month game with my friends up in LA, and because we don't get to play that much, I tend to try and give them more bang for their buck. So we tend to do a lot of combat, a lot of really cool encounters, and that doesn't really leave a lot of time for role-playing or like letting a scene hang. And they're relatively new, or at least some of them are relatively new, so I don't necessarily want to leave them too much space. But in general, I've been moving towards more mechanics like cool encounters and gameplay than I have like running scenes as much. For my other games where I'm running at a store where we're doing a West Marches game, those are kind of by necessity more skirmishy and gameplay heavy and survival heavy. Mostly because those games, the players don't know each other, or they might have played a few games together, but it's a drop-in, drop-out system, and there's dozens of players, so at any moment they might be at a table full of completely new people they've never played with before. So the role play is going to be light at best. So in general, the gameplay is going to be more focused on survival and combat and moving through encounters than it is going to be about like watching a scene of role play out between characters. And I'll be honest, because I kind of came from that Adventure Zone, that Critical Role, that Dimension 20 background with D&D, I've been feeling weirdly guilty about that. I've been feeling like maybe I am losing the plot of what's good in role-playing games, or maybe I'm getting worse as a DM because there's less space for roleplay. And then I've been thinking that maybe I'm getting too down on myself for no reason. The games I'm playing right now just swing less roleplay for practical reasons. And the roleplay happens, but it's more like roleplaying, deciding what your character does in combat or in certain situations than actually running scenes. And to that point, we tend to get a lot more done than if we just did a bunch of character work in scenes. The story moves along, the world moves along, the game runs at a healthy clip. And I think that comes down to sometimes, as a storyteller, or as a DM, or as a player, you need to tell instead of show. I think when I first started playing D&D, I would always make moves in character. I try to talk in character as much as I could. And these days, when I'm playing or when I'm DMing, I do way more just saying my character does this. And when I am talking in character, it's normally as a button on a scene, or to really put emphasis on something, or to discuss something in character if our characters need to really hash something out. But I value moving the story along so much more these days, and it might be just because I'm having less time to devote to single campaigns anymore. I typically am in a situation where if I'm in a D&D campaign, I don't really want it to be endless. If I jump in a D&D campaign, I want to know that it has an end point when I sign up. Or if I'm running a D&D campaign, I want to know that there's an end point. And I want to move it to that end point at a good clip. That doesn't mean you don't want any role-playing scenes. I would never say that. What I do say, though, is sometimes it's better to tell rather than show. Because I think one of the first lessons you learn in storytelling is show, don't tell. But I think that's one of those classic good pieces of writing advice for beginners that ends up being bad writing advice, or the kind of advice you can learn to ignore as you get more into it. If you want to show, you're putting more emphasis into a scene, which means you want to show like how that scene progresses. But sometimes you want to get to those good scenes faster. You shouldn't linger in a scene that doesn't have drama and payoff and good world building and good character building. If you're lingering in those scenes, you're just dragging your story out. So I think that's when you got to learn when to tell and when to show. And that's something I've been trying to do more of. And maybe these days I'm feeling like I'm leaning into too much tell, and I'd love to maybe dip my hands back into some show. I think it's always about finding a balance between those two elements, because the more you tell, the more of the story you get through. But the more you show, the more you can kind of linger in those moments and kind of really put emphasis on those moments and show off your character at a more grounded level. What I'll also say about that, though, is sometimes telling can be really impactful, especially if you are trying to show the grand scope of a story. If you tell something that could be a show moment in another story, it could be powerful. Like, say, if you're in a universe where atrocities happen every day and wars are commonplace, then sort of saying like, hey, this war happened off screen and this many people died. It could be jarring that that just happened, but it also communicates what your story's about. Where another person would linger in that battle and show you each different part of it and stuff. But if the story's not about that, or if the purpose is to kind of tell the scope of the story, then you've done a good thing by just moving the story along past that. And a great example of doing this well is The Black Company by Glenn Cook. There's so many horrible things that just are told. You just get told this horrible thing happens, and you're just like, wait, that should have been a whole scene, right? And it's not in those books, because it's just like, this is a world where that just happens, and it doesn't need to be lingered upon. It's just, that's what goes on. What's important is this other aspect of the story where we are going to show you stuff. And that's what the scene is. So I think when you're playing role-playing games, you really have to know where to land in those scenes. Like, when are the important moments you should stop, look at the world, look at your characters, and realize this is a pivotal moment. This could go one way or another. Now's the time to lower the camera into the scene and talk in character, to start showing instead of telling. But you don't want to do that at the wrong moment, or you don't want to do it too often, where every scene that could just be a, we bought this longbow from a shopkeeper, turns into a drawn out conversation that's maybe filled with goofs and gaffes, but ends up slowing the story down, so you end up doing like nothing in a 4-hour session. But yeah, you have to know how to pace your story at a macro level and a micro level. Always be looking to balance your show versus your tell. So if you're in a D&D game that feels like its pacing is slow, I would first look at how often you are going into scenes. I'd look at, say like, hey, we don't need to talk to this merchant. We can just say we bought this. And to kind of help you benchmark when it is appropriate to slip into character and start doing those scenes, slipping into your character's voice. You should always play your character in character, but slipping into like the shoes of your character and embodying them for a scene, I would look at 3 things. 1, character. Is there a way to meaningfully advance my character in this scene? Can I make a decision that changes where my character's heading or advances them down their personal journey? 2, is there something about the setting that can be revealed in this moment? This is often something the DM has to do in D&D or RPGs. But it could be related to a character's backstory or something you've previously discussed with the DM or something you know about the world that could be revealed in this moment. Not like a lore dump, but something like interesting or a secret that maybe everybody at the table knows, but is like something important that like a noble could tell you how the secret ships are actually powered by Leviathan whales, like in Blades in the Dark. Something cool that can be revealed in character and could change the way the story goes. Which leads us to number 3, plot. If you could advance plot in a scene, that's huge. I would always be looking for ways to push the plot forward when you're stepping into character like that. You should be making decisions. You should be setting the camera down, like into those scenes, when there's important decisions to be made. If you can do those 3 things, your scene is golden. Now, sometimes that's hard to know on the spot. It's hard to decide. So if you have trouble figuring out all those 3 things, if this scene is going to accomplish any or all of them, then I'll give you a quick hack. Just ask yourself, does this scene have conflict? And if it does, that's a good hint that it's time to step into the shoes of your character and start showing instead of telling. Try to find out if there's a lever to be pulled in the story or your character or the setting. If there's a decision to be made. If there's not, leave it to tell. Just say what happens. If it's not dramatic, leave it to the dice to decide. Just roll for it. If it's dramatic, and you want to roll, do that, because that's fun. It's not a binary. You can have a dramatic scene and roll some dice. But yeah, if there's drama to be had and it fits within the scope of your story, do it in a scene. But if not, don't waste your time. And don't waste the time of everyone else on the table. Anyway, check out this video. I think that's the major thing I would advise you when you're playing a game, when you're thinking about showing and not telling. Just try to find the conflict, find the levers to your story, to your character, to other people's characters, and to this setting. Showing and telling, there's no value, good or bad, to either. Showing is a tool and telling is a tool. They're tools about pacing and focus, not about quality. So if you take something from this, just remember, show and tell. Oh, and thank you so much to my patrons for helping support the content I'm bringing to you. If you liked the video, please leave a comment, like, subscribe. Tell me what you'd like to see in the next video. Catch you later.